The wind howled like a dying animal across the frozen plains of Montana Territory as Levi Kincaid shouldered open the door of his barn, fighting against the blizzard that had descended from the north with a vengeance that even the old-timers said they had never witnessed before. It was December of 1878, and the world had turned into a white nightmare where a man could lose his way between his porch and his stable if he was not careful. Levi had been checking on his horses when he heard something that made his blood run cold, a sound that did not belong to any animal he knew, a desperate crying that seemed almost human. He grabbed his lantern and pushed deeper into the barn, snow already accumulating on his shoulders despite the short distance from the main door. "Hello," he called out, his voice nearly swallowed by the shrieking wind that found every crack in the weathered boards. "Anyone there?" The crying came again, weaker this time, and Levi moved toward the back corner where he kept extra hay stacked against the winter cold. What he found there made him drop to his knees in shock. A woman lay curled on her side in the straw, her dress soaked through with melted snow and something else, her face pale as death itself, her dark hair plastered to her cheeks. Her eyes, when they opened to look at him, were the color of wild honey, filled with pain and fear and something else he could not quite name. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Help me. The baby is coming." Levi had delivered plenty of foals and calves in his 32 years, but a human child was another matter entirely. Still, there was no doctor within 20 miles, and even if there had been, no one could travel through this storm. He was all she had, and from the way her body convulsed with another contraction, there was no time to waste. "What is your name?" he asked, shrugging off his heavy coat and spreading it over her trembling form. "Beatrice," she gasped. "Beatrice Harper. I was trying to reach the settlement when the storm hit. My husband died 2 months ago from pneumonia. I have no one else." Her hand gripped his wrist with surprising strength as another wave of pain crashed through her, and Levi saw the truth written in her eyes. This baby was coming now, whether he was ready or not. He ran to the barn entrance and grabbed every blanket he could find from the tack room, then pumped water from the well just outside, grateful that it had not yet frozen solid. His hands moved with purpose born of necessity as he built up the small stove he kept in the barn for the coldest nights, stoking the fire until warmth began to spread through the space. "I am going to help you," he said, returning to kneel beside her. "My name is Levi Kincaid, and I promise you, I will not let anything happen to you or your child." Beatrice nodded, tears streaming down her face, mixing with the sweat that beaded on her forehead despite the cold. She could not have been more than 23 or 24, Levi guessed, far too young to be facing this alone in a stranger's barn during the worst blizzard Montana had seen in a decade. But life in the West was hard, and it cared nothing for fairness or gentle timing. The hours that followed would stay burned in Levi's memory for the rest of his life. Beatrice was strong, stronger than she had any right to be after walking through a blizzard while 9 months pregnant. She followed his instructions when he told her to push, bore down with everything she had when the contractions came in waves that seemed to have no end. Levi had never felt so helpless or so necessary all at once. He spoke to her constantly, keeping her focused, telling her about his ranch, about the horses he raised, about anything that might keep her mind from the pain that was trying to tear her apart from the inside. "You are doing so well," he kept saying. "Just a little more, Beatrice. Stay with me." "I cannot," she sobbed at one point, her strength seeming to fail. "I cannot do this anymore." "Yes, you can," Levi said firmly, taking her hand in both of his. "You are the bravest woman I have ever met, walking through that storm to find shelter. This baby is lucky to have you as a mother." Now push, Beatrice. Push for your child. Something in his words must have reached her because she gathered herself for one more tremendous effort. Outside, the blizzard raged with renewed fury, as if trying to drown out the cries that came from within the barn. Then, in a rush that seemed both endless and instantaneous, the baby slipped free into Levi's waiting hands. He caught the tiny, slippery form with all the care he could muster, his heart nearly stopping when he saw how still and blue the infant was. "No," he breathed, fear clawing at his throat. He remembered something his mother had done once with a calf that was not breathing, and he turned the baby gently, clearing the tiny nose and mouth with his finger, then rubbing the small back with firm, quick motions. "Come on, little one. Breathe." For 3 heartbeats that felt like 3 lifetimes, nothing happened. Then the baby's chest hitched, and a thin wail filled the barn, growing stronger with each second. Levi nearly collapsed with relief as the infant's skin began to pink up, the tiny hands curling into fists as the baby protested this strange, cold world it had been born into. "You have a son," Levi said, his voice rough with emotion as he quickly wrapped the baby in the cleanest, warmest blankets he had, holding the tiny bundle close to his chest to share his body heat. "Beatrice, you have a beautiful son." Beatrice was crying and laughing all at once, her arms reaching out even though she barely had the strength to lift them. Levi carefully placed the baby against her chest, helping her arrange the blankets so they were both covered by his heavy coat and every other piece of cloth he could find. The infant rooted instinctively toward his mother, and Levi turned away to give them privacy, though he stayed close enough to help if needed. He tended to the afterbirth with the same calm efficiency he would have used for one of his mares, making sure Beatrice was no longer bleeding heavily, keeping her warm and comfortable. The wind continued to hammer at the barn walls, but inside, warmed by the stove and surrounded by the gentle sounds of horses shifting in their stalls, there was a pocket of peace that felt almost sacred. "Thank you," Beatrice whispered after a while when the baby had nursed and fallen asleep against her. "I thought we were going to die out there. When I saw your barn, it was like God himself was showing me mercy." "You are both safe now," Levi assured her, though his mind was already racing ahead to the challenges that still faced them. The storm showed no signs of letting up, and Beatrice needed proper rest, proper food, proper care. "Rest if you can, I will keep watch." He did exactly that through the long night, stoking the fire, checking on his animals and glancing over every few minutes to make sure mother and child were still breathing, still warm. There was something about the way Beatrice held her son, with such fierce, protective love despite her exhaustion, that stirred something in Levi's chest he had not felt in years. He had been alone on this ranch since his father died 5 years back, had grown used to the solitude and the simple company of his horses. But watching Beatrice with her baby, he felt the weight of his loneliness in a way he had not allowed himself to feel before. When dawn finally broke, it revealed a world transformed into solid white, with drifts piled halfway up the barn walls and no sign that the storm would break anytime soon. Levi made his way to the house through snow that came up to his thighs, retrieving proper food and supplies, his mind working through the reality of the situation. Beatrice and her son could not possibly leave until the weather cleared, which might be days. He would need to make them comfortable, and that meant bringing them into the house. "I am going to carry you inside," he told Beatrice when he returned. "You cannot stay in the barn another night, not with the baby." "I do not want to impose," she protested weakly, but Levi could see the relief in her eyes. "You are not imposing. You are accepting help from a neighbor, which is what we do out here." He fashioned a sort of sling from blankets to carry the baby against his chest, then lifted Beatrice as carefully as if she were made of glass. She weighed almost nothing, and he realized she had probably been half-starved even before the ordeal of childbirth. The journey to the house was treacherous, but Levi had tied a rope from the barn to his porch for exactly this kind of emergency. He followed it hand over hand, Beatrice clinging to his neck, the baby secure between them, until they stumbled through his front door into the warmth of the kitchen where he had left the stove burning. His house was simple but sturdy, built by his father's hands from good Montana timber. There were 2 bedrooms, and Levi settled Beatrice in the larger one, the one that had belonged to his parents, with its proper bed and quilts his mother had sewn before the fever took her. He brought water and soup, watching to make sure Beatrice ate, helping her when her hands shook too badly to hold the spoon. "You should have your own family," Beatrice said at one point, looking around the house with its signs of careful masculine care but no woman's touch. "This is a good home." "I was engaged once," Levi found himself saying, though he rarely spoke of it. "She decided ranch life was too hard, too lonely, went back east to marry a banker." He shrugged as if it did not matter, though the wound had taken years to stop aching. "I reckon she was right. It is a hard life out here. But it is an honest one," Beatrice said softly. "My husband and I were trying to homestead, but after he died, I lost the claim. I was going to stay with his cousin in Helena, try to find work there, but the baby came early." She looked down at her son, sleeping peacefully in her arms. "I do not even know what I am going to do now." "Right now, you are going to heal and take care of that little one," Levi said firmly. "Everything else can wait until the storm passes." But the storm did not pass, not for 3 more days. During that time, Levi found himself settling into a strange new rhythm. He would rise before dawn to tend the animals, breaking ice from water troughs and making sure the horses had enough hay to keep their body heat up. Then he would return to the house to cook breakfast, something he had always done for himself, but now did with more care, trying to make the simple eggs and bacon and biscuits as nourishing as possible for a woman who was recovering from childbirth. Beatrice was a gracious guest despite her weakness. She insisted on helping where she could, mending a tear in one of his shirts with neat, small stitches, folding the laundry that had piled up. But mostly, she focused on her son, whom she had named Thomas after his father. Levi found himself drawn to the baby in ways he had not expected. When Beatrice needed to rest, he would hold the tiny boy, marveling at the perfect miniature fingers and the way Thomas would grip his thumb with surprising strength. "You are a natural," Beatrice told him one evening as they sat by the fire, the wind still howling outside but the house warm and secure. Thomas was asleep against Levi's shoulder, a warm weight that felt somehow right. "I am better with horses than babies," Levi protested, but he smiled as he said it. "I do not think that is true." Beatrice watched him with those honey-colored eyes, and Levi felt something shift in the air between them, something that went beyond gratitude or simple kindness. "You saved our lives, Levi. I will never be able to repay that debt." "There is no debt," he said quietly. "Anyone would have done the same. But it was not anyone, it was you." Her voice was soft, but there was an intensity to it that made Levi look up, made him meet her gaze and see something there that quickened his pulse. "I keep thinking about what would have happened if I had not found your barn, if you had not been kind enough to help a stranger." "I am just glad you did find it," Levi said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. In 3 days, this woman and her child had become important to him in ways he was only beginning to understand. The house felt different with them in it, felt alive in a way it had not been since his mother died. He found himself listening for Thomas's small sounds, found himself looking forward to the conversations he had with Beatrice, as they shared meals or sat by the fire in the evenings. They talked about everything during those snow-bound days. Beatrice told him about growing up in Ohio, about falling in love with Thomas Harper when she was 18, and following him west with stars in her eyes and dreams of a new life. She spoke of the hardship and the beauty she had found in Montana, of the way her husband had worked himself to exhaustion trying to prove up their claim, of the pneumonia that had taken him in a matter of days, leaving her alone and pregnant and terrified. Levi shared his own stories, about learning to ranch from his father, about the years of building up his herd and his reputation as a man who raised the finest horses in the territory. He told her about the loneliness of being the only person for miles around, about the way he sometimes went weeks without speaking to another human soul, about the beauty of the land that could kill you as easily as it could feed you. "You ever think about leaving?" Beatrice asked. "Going somewhere easier, somewhere with more people, every winter," Levi admitted with a rueful smile. "And then spring comes and I remember why I stay. There is something about this land that gets into your blood. It is harsh, but it is honest. You know exactly where you stand out here." "I think I understand that," Beatrice said thoughtfully. "Even after everything that has happened, I do not want to leave. I want Thomas to grow up knowing this kind of freedom, this kind of space." The way she said it made Levi's heart beat faster. She was speaking of a future here in Montana, and though she did not say it directly, he could hear the uncertainty beneath her words. Where would she go when the storm ended? How would she survive as a woman alone with an infant child? When the weather finally broke on the fourth day, revealing a world of blinding white beauty under a sky so blue it hurt to look at, Levi found himself dreading what came next. He cleared a path to the barn, checked on his animals, rode out to make sure his fences had not been too badly damaged by the drifting snow. All the while, his mind kept circling back to the question he was almost afraid to ask himself. What if Beatrice did not have to leave? That evening, as they sat down to dinner together, Thomas sleeping peacefully in a wooden crate Levi had lined with soft blankets to serve as a temporary cradle, Levi found his courage. "I have been thinking," he started, then had to clear his throat and try again. "You said you were going to Helena to stay with your husband's cousin and find work there." "Yes," Beatrice said carefully, her spoon paused halfway to her mouth. "Though I confess I am not sure what kind of work I can do with a newborn baby. I can sew well enough and I can cook and clean, but most positions require long hours and I cannot leave Thomas alone." "What if you did not go to Helena?" Levi said, the words coming out in a rush. "What if you stayed here instead?" Beatrice set down her spoon, her eyes wide. "Levi, I cannot continue to impose on your hospitality. You have already done so much. I am not talking about imposing. I am talking about staying permanently." He took a breath, knowing he had to say this right, had to make her understand. "This ranch is too big for one person. I could use help with the house, with the cooking and the mending and all the things I am not very good at. And Thomas needs a stable home, a safe place to grow up. You both do. Are you offering me employment?" Beatrice asked, her voice carefully neutral, though Levi could see the emotion swirling in her eyes. "No," he said, then realized how that sounded and hurried to clarify. "I mean, yes, if that is how you want to think of it at first. But Beatrice, I am offering you more than that if you are willing to consider it. I am offering you a partnership, a marriage." The silence that followed was so complete that Levi could hear the crackling of the fire, the soft sound of Thomas breathing, his own heart hammering against his ribs. He had not planned to propose like this, blurting it out over a simple dinner of stew and cornbread. But there it was, the truth he had been dancing around for days now. The knowledge that he had fallen in love with this brave, beautiful woman who had stumbled into his barn during a blizzard and changed his life forever. "You do not know me," Beatrice whispered, but there were tears shining in her eyes. "We have known each other less than a week. I know you are strong and brave. I know you love your son more than anything in this world. I know you have a kind heart and a quick mind, and you do not give up even when things are impossibly hard." Levi reached across the table and took her hand, his rough fingers gentle as they covered hers. "I know that this house has felt more like a home in the past 4 days than it has in the past 5 years. I know I want to help you raise Thomas, to give him a father who will love him as if he were my own blood. And I know that when I think about you leaving, about never seeing you again, it feels like someone is driving a knife into my chest." "Levi," Beatrice said, his name barely a breath. "I feel it too. I have been so afraid to admit it, even to myself, but I feel it too. When you carried me into this house, when I watched you hold my son with such tenderness, when we have talked late into the night, I have felt something I never thought I would feel again. But my husband has been dead only 2 months. People will talk. They will say terrible things about both of us." "Let them talk," Levi said firmly. "We know the truth of it. You did not betray Thomas Harper by surviving. You did not dishonor his memory by doing what you had to do to protect your child. And if falling in love again makes you happy, makes Thomas safe and cared for, then that is what matters." Beatrice was crying openly now, but they were not tears of grief or fear. "Are you sure?" she asked. "Are you truly sure you want this, want us? Being a father to another man's child is no small thing." "I am absolutely certain," Levi said, and he had never meant anything more in his life. "Thomas will know about his father, about Thomas Harper's courage and hard work, about the man who loved you and would have loved him. But I will be there for every step, every scraped knee, every question, every moment. If you will have me, I will be the best husband and father I know how to be." Beatrice stood, and Levi rose with her, his heart in his throat. She crossed to him, and when she lifted her face to his, he saw the answer in her eyes before she spoke it aloud. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, Levi Kincaid, I will marry you." He kissed her then, gently because she was still healing, but with all the feeling that had been building in him since the moment he found her in his barn. She melted against him, her hands coming up to rest against his chest, and Levi felt something settle into place inside him, something he had not even known was missing until Beatrice filled the space. They were married 3 weeks later by the circuit preacher who came through the area once a month. It was a simple ceremony held in the small church in the nearest settlement, attended by a handful of neighbors who were curious about Levi's sudden marriage, but kind enough to keep any gossip to themselves when they saw how happy the new couple was. Beatrice wore a dress that Levi had bought for her in town, a simple calico in deep blue that matched the Montana sky. Thomas, now 3 weeks old, slept through the entire ceremony in Levi's arms, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Levi kissed his bride with one hand, gently cradling his new son. The neighbors threw them a small celebration at the church, bringing food and well wishes, and Levi felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the wood stove heating the room. This was what community meant, what family meant. He had been alone for so long that he had forgotten the simple joy of being surrounded by people who cared, who wanted to see him happy. "You got yourself a good one there, Kincaid," his nearest neighbor, a grizzled rancher named Samuel, told him as they stood watching Beatrice chat with some of the women folk. "That little lady has sand, walking through a blizzard while carrying a baby." "She does at that," Levi agreed, unable to keep the pride from his voice. "I am a lucky man." "Luck had nothing to do with it," Samuel said with a knowing look. You helped her when she needed it most, and you are doing right by her and the boy. That is character, not luck." Maybe it was both, Levi thought as he drove Beatrice and Thomas home in the wagon, the three of them bundled against the February cold. Luck had brought Beatrice to his barn during that blizzard, but everything that had happened since had been choice, had been two people deciding to take a chance on something unexpected and beautiful. Life settled into new patterns after the wedding. Beatrice proved to be an excellent ranch wife, managing the household with quiet efficiency while still caring for Thomas. She made curtains for the windows and planted an herb garden in the kitchen, and slowly but surely transformed the house from a bachelor's quarters into a real home. Levi found himself looking forward to the end of each workday, knowing he would return to a warm house filled with good smells and the sound of his wife singing softly to their son. Because Thomas was their son now, in every way that mattered. Levi was there for the first time. The baby smiled, a gummy, toothless grin that made his heart melt. He was there for the first rolling over, the first attempts at sitting up, all the small miracles of a child growing and thriving. He walked the floor with Thomas during the nights when the baby was colicky, sang him cowboy songs in a voice that was more enthusiasm than talent, showed him the horses and the chickens, and explained everything about ranch life as if the infant could understand every word. "You are a wonderful father," Beatrice told him one spring evening as they sat on the porch watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. Thomas was drowsing in her arms, and she leaned against Levi's shoulder with the ease of a woman who knew she was loved. "I hope you know that." "He makes it easy," Levi said, stroking one finger down the baby's soft cheek. "He is a good boy. He has your temperament, steady and brave." "He has your eyes," Beatrice said, and though it was not literally true, Levi understood what she meant. Thomas looked at the world with curiosity and wonder, the same way Levi tried to look at each new day, as a gift to be appreciated rather than a burden to be endured. As summer came on, and the Montana landscape exploded into green life, they fell into the rhythm of ranch work together. Beatrice proved to have a way with the horses that surprised them both, and Levi taught her to ride properly, to help him with the training and the daily care of the animals. They would take Thomas out with them, the baby secured in a sling against Beatrice's chest, and Levi found a deep satisfaction in working side by side with his wife, building something together. The other ranchers and their wives accepted Beatrice more and more as time went on. At first there had been some whispered speculation about the speed of their courtship and marriage, but Beatrice's quiet dignity and Levi's obvious devotion to her, and Thomas won most people over. They were invited to barn raisings and church socials, and Beatrice slowly built friendships with the other women, trading recipes and sewing patterns and all the small intimacies that created community. "I never thought I would be this happy again," Beatrice told Levi one night as they lay in bed, the summer darkness warm around them. Thomas was finally sleeping through the night in his cradle at the foot of their bed, and they had the rare luxury of time alone together. "After Thomas Harper died, I thought my life was over, that I would just be going through the motions of survival forever." "I know what you mean," Levi said, pulling her closer. "After Sarah left, I convinced myself I was content alone, that I did not need anyone else, but I was lying to myself. I needed you, Beatrice. I needed both of you." She kissed him then, and the passion between them flared the way it always did, hot and sweet and tinged with the wonder of second chances. They made love slowly, quietly, mindful of the sleeping baby nearby, but unable to resist the pull they felt toward each other. Afterward, as Beatrice drifted off to sleep in his arms, Levi stared up at the ceiling and counted his blessings, something he tried to do every night since the blizzard that had changed everything. The seasons turned, and Thomas grew from an infant to a chubby, curious baby who was starting to pull himself up on furniture and babble nonsense syllables that Levi and Beatrice both insisted sounded like real words. The ranch prospered as well, with Levi selling several horses at good prices and buying more land to expand his grazing area. Money was never plentiful, but there was always enough, and more importantly, there was joy in the daily work of building a life together. When Beatrice told him she was pregnant again in the autumn of 1879, nearly a year after that fateful blizzard, Levi felt a surge of emotion so strong it nearly brought him to his knees. This would be their child, born of their love, a sibling for Thomas, and a symbol of everything they had built together. "Are you happy?" Beatrice asked anxiously, searching his face. "I know we have not been married even a year and money is always tight, but I am happy, Levi. I want this baby so much." "Happy does not begin to cover it," Levi assured her, pulling her into his arms and spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to stop before she got dizzy. "I love you, Beatrice. I love Thomas, and I already love this new baby. We are going to have a wonderful life together." And they did, though it was not always easy. The winter of 1879-1880 brought more blizzards, though none quite as fierce as the one that had brought Beatrice to his door. Thomas was walking now, tottering around on sturdy legs, getting into everything with the fearless curiosity of a toddler. Beatrice grew round with their second child, and Levi hovered over her protectively, remembering the difficulty of Thomas's birth and terrified something would go wrong this time. "I am fine," Beatrice kept telling him, laughing at his anxious questions and constant checking. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time, Levi. I am strong, and this baby seems determined to be just as healthy as Thomas was." She was right, of course. When their daughter made her appearance on a warm May morning in 1880, it was with far less drama than Thomas's birth. The midwife from the settlement was there to help, and though Beatrice labored long and hard, the baby girl came into the world squalling and pink and perfect. Levi held her for the first time and felt his heart expand in ways he had not thought possible, looking down at the tiny face that was a perfect blend of his features and Beatrice's. "She needs a name," Beatrice said, watching him with exhausted but joyful eyes from the bed. Thomas was napping in the next room, worn out from the excitement of all the activity. "What about Rose?" Levi suggested. "After the wild roses that were blooming the day we got married." "Rose Kincaid," Beatrice said, testing the name. "I love it, Rose Elizabeth Kincaid." Their daughter grew as swiftly as Thomas had, and the house rang with the sounds of children's laughter, of sibling squabbles and games, and the million small moments that made up a childhood. Thomas, who had no memory of his birth father, called Levi Papa from the time he could talk, and Levi's heart swelled every time he heard it. He made sure to tell Thomas stories about Thomas Harper, about his courage and his dreams, wanting the boy to know where he came from even as he grew up secure in Levi's love. As the years passed, the Kincaid Ranch became known throughout Montana Territory as a place of hospitality and good horses. Levi and Beatrice worked side by side, raising their children and their animals with equal care and dedication. They added 2 more children to their family, another boy they named Samuel after Levi's father, born in 1882, and a final daughter, Margaret, in 1884. The house that had once seemed too big for one lonely cowboy now felt perfectly sized for a family of 6, filled with noise and love and life. Thomas grew into a strapping young man who had his mother's honey-colored eyes and his father Thomas Harper's dark hair, combined with Levi's steady, patient way with horses. He took over more and more of the ranch work as he got older, working alongside Levi with the easy partnership that came from mutual respect and deep affection. Rose was bright and spirited, always asking questions and wanting to know the why of everything. Samuel was the dreamer of the family, happiest when he was reading books or drawing pictures of the Montana landscape. And little Margaret was their surprise, born when Beatrice was nearly 40 and Levi thought their family was complete, a bundle of energy and mischief who kept them all on their toes. On cold winter nights, when the wind howled outside just as it had on that long-ago December evening, Levi would sometimes catch Beatrice's eye across the dinner table, with their children chattering around them and the house warm and secure, and they would share a smile that needed no words. They both knew how lucky they were, how easily things could have gone differently. If the blizzard had been just a little worse, if Beatrice had not found his barn, if Levi had not been brave enough to help a stranger in need, if they had not taken a chance on an unlikely love, none of this would exist. You ever regret it? Beatrice asked him one evening in the winter of 1890, 12 years after that fateful blizzard. They were alone in their bedroom, the children all asleep in their own rooms now that the oldest three were big enough to share space and give the parents some privacy. Not the life we have built, but the way it started. I sometimes think about those people at our wedding who thought we were rushing into things, who gossiped about how quickly I remarried. Never, Levi said firmly, pulling her close. Not for a single moment have I regretted it. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Beatrice. You and our children. I would not change a single thing about how we found each other. Not even the blizzard, she teased, but her eyes were serious. Especially not the blizzard, he said, because that storm brought you to me. It gave me everything I have now, everything that matters. So no, I do not regret a single second of it. They made love that night with the tenderness of long-married couples, who knew each other's bodies as well as their own, who had weathered years of hardship and joy together and come through stronger for it. Afterward, as Beatrice slept peacefully beside him, Levi thought about the young man he had been, convinced he was content with solitude, certain that love had passed him by. He thought about the terrified young woman who had stumbled into his barn with nothing but her courage and her unborn child, determined to survive no matter what it took. They had both been lost in their own ways, and they had found each other in the middle of the worst storm Montana had seen in years. From that desperate beginning had grown something beautiful and lasting, a family and a life that neither of them could have built alone. It was not always easy, ranching in Montana territory, raising 4 children and running a successful horse operation. But it was good, deeply and satisfyingly good in ways that made all the hardships worthwhile. Thomas, their oldest son, married in 1896 to a sweet girl from the settlement named Emma, and they built a small house on the edge of Levi and Beatrice's property, expanding the ranch and keeping the family close. When Emma gave birth to their first child in 1897, making Levi and Beatrice grandparents for the first time, Levi thought his heart might burst from the sheer abundance of joy he felt. He held his grandson, another Thomas to carry on the name, and marveled at the continuity of it all, at the way life kept moving forward, kept creating new beginnings. Your grandfather would be proud, Levi told his son, meaning both himself and the Thomas Harper that the boy had never known but whose blood he carried. You are a good man, and you are going to be a wonderful father. I learned from the best, Thomas said simply, and the look he gave Levi held a lifetime of love and gratitude. The years continued to roll by, bringing changes both joyful and sad. Samuel decided ranch life was not for him and moved to Helena to become a teacher. But he visited often and stayed close to the family despite the distance. Rose married a neighboring rancher's son and became a force of nature in the local community, organizing church socials and starting a small school for the children in the area. Margaret, their youngest, showed every sign of being as strong-willed and independent as her mother, determined to learn everything about horse breeding and ranch management. Levi and Beatrice grew older together, silver creeping into their hair, their faces weathering from years of Montana sun and wind. But the love between them never diminished. If anything, it grew deeper with time, seasoned by all the experiences they had shared, all the challenges they had overcome together. They still held hands as they walked from the house to the barn. They still stole kisses in the kitchen when they thought no one was looking. They still talked late into the night, sharing dreams and memories and plans for the future. "We have had a good life," Beatrice said one evening in the summer of 1905, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and rose. Their children were all grown now, building their own lives, but the ranch was still full of activity with grandchildren running through the fields and new foals being born each spring. "Better than I ever could have imagined on that night when I thought I was going to die in the snow." "We have," Levi agreed, taking her hand in his. His joints ached a bit more these days, and he did not work as hard as he once had, leaving more and more of the physical labor to Thomas and the hands they employed. But he could still ride, still train the young horses, still do the work he loved. "And we are not done yet. I plan to keep you around for a good many more years." "Is that so?" Beatrice laughed, the sound as beautiful to him now as it had been when he first heard it 27 years ago. "I suppose I can live with that plan." They watched the sun dip below the horizon, painting the Montana landscape in twilight colors, and Levi thought about all the moments that had led to this one. The blizzard that should have killed Beatrice and Thomas, but instead brought them to his door. The terrifying, miraculous night when he had caught a newborn baby in his hands and wrapped him warm against the cold. The courage it had taken for both of them to open their hearts again after loss and disappointment. The years of hard work and harder winters, of children born and raised, of a partnership that had become the foundation of everything good in his life. "I love you," he told Beatrice, words he said every day but never often enough. "I have loved you since the moment I found you in my barn, though I did not know it at the time. You are my heart, Beatrice." "And you are mine," she said, leaning her head against his shoulder. "My brave cowboy who was not afraid to catch a baby in a blizzard, to take in a desperate stranger, to build a life with me when neither of us knew if it would work. You are my miracle, Levi Kincaid." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge overhead, the same stars that had looked down on a younger Levi fighting through a blizzard to check on his horses, on a desperate Beatrice stumbling through the snow trying to find shelter. The same stars that had witnessed a birth in a barn, a love that grew from the most unlikely of beginnings, a family that was built on courage and kindness, and the willingness to take chances on each other. Inside the house, they could hear the sounds of family gathered for dinner. Thomas and Emma and their children, Margaret home from her work in the breeding barn, even Rose and her husband who had ridden over for the evening. This was the legacy they had built together, not just children and grandchildren, but a sense of home and belonging that would outlast them both. It was more than either of them had dreamed of on that winter night so long ago, and yet it felt inevitable somehow, as if the blizzard had been destiny pushing them together, as if everything that came after had been written in the stars. "Come on," Beatrice said, standing and tugging gently on Levi's hand. "Our family is waiting, and I believe I smell Margaret's famous apple pie." Levi rose, his hand still clasped in hers, and together they walked into the house filled with light and laughter and love. This was their happy ending, though it did not feel like an ending at all, but rather a continuation. A story that would go on through their children and grandchildren, through the ranch they had built and the love they had shared. The blizzard was long past, but its gift remained, growing stronger with each passing year, warming them from the inside out better than any fire ever could. And on cold winter nights, when the wind howled across the Montana plains and snow piled high against the barn walls, Levi would hold Beatrice close and remember that terrible, wonderful night when she gave birth during a blizzard in his barn, when he caught her baby and wrapped him warm, when two lost souls found each other in the storm and decided to build something beautiful together. It was the best decision either of them had ever made, and not a day went by that they did not give thanks for the chance encounter that had brought them together. Years later, when Levi was an old man surrounded by children and grandchildren and even a few great-grandchildren, someone asked him what the secret to a happy life was. He thought about it for a long moment, his weathered hand reaching for Beatrice's, still finding comfort in her touch after 5 decades together. "The secret," he said finally, "is being willing to help a stranger in a storm, even when it is inconvenient or frightening. It is opening your heart when you think it is too broken to love again. It is taking chances on unlikely beginnings and having faith that something beautiful can grow from hardship. And most of all, it is finding the person who feels like home and holding on to them with everything you have." He looked at Beatrice then, saw the tears shining in her eyes, and knew she was remembering the same things he was. The snow and the fear and the pain, yes, but also the courage and the kindness and the love that had transformed everything. They had been given a gift that night, wrapped in a blizzard and delivered into a cowboy's hands, and they had spent a lifetime honoring that gift, nurturing it, letting it grow into something that would outlast them both. That was the true story of their life together, Levi thought. Not just the dramatic beginning, though that made for good telling around winter fires, but all the days that followed, the ordinary moments and the extraordinary ones, the hard times and the joyful ones, all woven together into a tapestry of love and commitment and family. It was a story that began with a blizzard and a birth and a cowboy brave enough to help, but it did not end there. It would never really end, he realized, as long as their descendants remembered where they came from, remembered the love that had started it all. And so Levi and Beatrice Kincaid lived out their days on the Montana ranch, where fate had brought them together, surrounded by the family they had built, and the love they had nurtured through decades of life in the Wild West. They had faced down blizzards and heartbreak, had celebrated births and marriages, had worked hard and loved harder, and through it all, they had never forgotten the miracle of that snowy December night when a desperate woman found shelter in a cowboy's barn, and two broken hearts found a way to heal each other. It was a love story for the ages, born of the harsh Montana winter and the kindness of a solitary cowboy, nurtured through years of partnership and devotion, and passed down through generations as a reminder that sometimes the most beautiful things in life come from the most unexpected places. The blizzard had been terrible and terrifying, but it had also been the beginning of everything good in both their lives. And for that, they would always be grateful, even on the hardest days, even when the work was backbreaking and the winters seemed endless. Because in the end, what mattered was not how their story began, but how they had chosen to write it together, day by day, year by year, building a life that was richer and fuller than either of them could have imagined alone. The cowboy had caught the baby and wrapped him warm, and in doing so, he had caught a family, caught a future, caught a love that would sustain him for the rest of his life. It was more than enough. It was everything.